this. Why are we so crazy in Britain that we would give sanctuary to people who want our way of life over? And I've still never had a response to that question.
You will be shocked when you hear the words of Douglas Murray on air. He was not shy and was not afraid of the consequences of telling the truth about what was happening in our country. The presenter and I were really jaw-dropping from everything he had said. I've selected the most interesting scenes for you, so we're starting to watch.
Why are we so crazy in Britain that we would give sanctuary to people who want our way of life over? And I've still never had a response to that question. I've asked it for many years, and I've written extensively about it, and I still cannot understand how a society can be so insane that it can welcome in people who want to destroy it. But let's park that for a second.
According to statistics, the number of asylum applications in the country has increased this year, despite promises by the previous government to reduce their number. At the end of June, almost 119,000 people were awaiting an initial decision on asylum applications. Rishi Sunak stated earlier that he planned to eliminate the list of initial asylum decisions as part of a 5-point plan to reduce illegal immigration. Keir Starmer hoped to improve the asylum system, but the number of applications has not changed at all. Theoretically, the previous government had the opportunity to continue reviewing the applications, but it seems that it decided not to do so. At the end of June, there were 1,891 asylum applications filed before June 2022 in the archive, for which an initial decision had not yet been made, as the figures show.
It's very clear. It was actually after October 7th. I said, why are we in Britain so stupid that we allowed people like former Hamas military commander in the West Bank to live in London? Why? What did we in Britain get out of allowing terrorists to live in our midst? Why is the former Deputy Prime Minister of Iran, who wrote the book justifying the murder of the British novelist Salman Rushdie,
the ex-leader of the Hamas, lived in a London municipal property, which he purchased at a significant discount. He came to the UK in the 90s and later obtained British citizenship. He continued to work for Hamas and conducted secret negotiations on reviving sabotaging in Israel. Unshocked, he also helped launder money to support activity in both Gaza and the West Bank. In 2003, he became a municipal tenant of a house with a garden and garage in Barnet, which he purchased at a significant discount, since the property was municipal property.
Southport was such a heinous crime in an area where, I mean, you know, unfortunately we've got sort of used to terrorist attacks in some of our major cities, but an appalling, brutal attack like this on the weakest and most vulnerable target is something which so horrifies people that of course they scour around looking for people to blame. Now we'll see when the trial comes up if there were any motivations or, as it were, inspirations for this vile young man who did this.
We often have battles between migrants and the local population. We protest, and migrants respond with sea-in statements that this is their country now. So we were promised cheap workers in the face of newcomers. Instead, they provoked a deep economic crisis. And now they are dragging the country into a civil war. The reason for the pogroms was the crime in Southport. The rapid influx of migrants is severely splitting society. They aggressively impose their values, their religion, their way of life. They don't want to assimilate. Many are determined to build their new world. After the incident, many people came out to protest. The wave of outrage was actively supported by looters. Wine, phones and gadgets were swept off store shelves, storefronts were smashed with bricks, and arson was massively organized. The confrontation unfolded so massive and aggressive that Elon Musk declared that a civil war was inevitable in Britain. There is a feeling that the control of the media in Britain is carried out by the same people who did everything to fill the country with migrants. So in their logic, crimes are an unfortunate incident and our outrage is crime. By the way, the local police behave according to the same logic. Most of their work is devoted to the protection of migrants.
The situation in Southport is, as you say, it's a very interesting example of what can happen with social media. I don't care about these agitators like the people you mentioned, let alone Alistair Campbell, who's a fascinating man in the projection that he is able.
I completely agree.
To do. It's extraordinary. He's a very bizarre man. He, I mean, the idea that we need to listen to Alistair Campbell talking about truth in public life is kind of preposterous to me and anyone else with a long-term memory.
The one who staged this terrible sabotage, by the way, is not a Muslim and a migrant. He was born in the UK and is a native of Southport. Some media outlets even write that he is a Christian. There were mass clashes of skinheads in the cities who smashed mosques and Muslims. The authorities were on the side of the Muslims.
But I have to say, having covered a lot of terrorist incidents in my life, one of the things that anyone who's wise knows is just wait and see who is responsible before you start sounding off. And unfortunately, there's lots of people who don't have the discipline to do that. Some people who in the immediate aftermath of something are just, as I say, scouring for people to blame. I think that there are several lessons to be taken from this, though.
No matter how terrible it sounds, criminal sabotage no longer surprises anyone. Unfortunately, we are used to terrorist attacks. The UK has not faced attacks from international terrorism for a long time, but this does not mean that fanatics do not pay attention to our country. London is actively involved in military operations in Afghanistan and Iraq and is part of the international coalition fighting terrorist organizations. The UK is also actively involved in the events in Syria and Iraq, which makes it an attractive target for criminals. As the United States' closest ally, it is becoming a prime target for terrorists. The political support for Israel is also hated by Islamists. If we talk about terrorism as a phenomenon, and not about the random actions of individual psychopaths, then this is a collective phenomenon. Criminals are almost always associated with recruiters or ideologies, which highlights the systemic nature of this threat.
One is, we cannot be in a situation in our society, in Britain or anywhere else, where we are only one madman's attack from responses like this happening. I have argued for decades now that if we had a sensible asylum policy and a reasonable immigration policy and we didn't allow thousands of people to come into the country illegally
The main source of threats is domestic terrorism. This threat is too unpredictable. It is more difficult to detect and investigate. The rapid development of technology continues to create both opportunities and risks for counter-terrorism efforts. Domestic terrorism has been at the root of about 67% of sabotage in the UK since 2018.
When people say now that my book, The Strange Death of Europe, was prophetic, I say it wasn't prophetic. You didn't need to be a prophet to see the loss of trust in society, the scouring around for people to blame, the much more. You didn't need to be a prophet to see that. You just had to have your eyes open and be willing to say what you saw with them. And too few people were willing to do that. And when you have a situation like Southport, it reminds you that the situation which our politicians have created in Britain is such that you are only one madman's behavior away from having significant civil unrest.
Murray's book is truly prophetic. Murray talked to the migrants, becoming a witness to what was happening. He touched on the topics of the decline in the birth rate of the indigenous population of Europe, mass migration and Merkel's disastrous decision to accept hundreds of thousands of migrants, as well as the unwillingness of migrants to integrate. Europe needs a workforce and cultural diversity. This is important in today's globalized world. Murray partly blamed the relaxed post the Second World War and sometimes unreasonable European elite, which for decades promoted the ideas of multiculturalism and sought integration at all costs, and instilling in Europeans that we are responsible for all the troubles. Europe is exhausted and tired. As a living organism, it has developed and flourished, but now it is faced with aging and decline.
We do have thousands of people coming illegally all the time and never being returned. And we had net migration of almost 750,000 in the last year of a Conservative government that had promised in election after election to bring immigration, net legal migration, down to 1990s levels. And they didn't. Labour, Conservative, the Liberal Democrats, all in government, promised to bring down net migration and to stop illegal migration.
Immigration is too high today, and it needs to be reduced. We don't need to involve people to do jobs that UK citizens could do with proper training and support. There should be a clear limit on the number of migrants and restrict access to those who destroy our country and economy. There is a feeling that the government is unable to impose any control.
And the problem for the Starmer government is they resurrected the EDL, that as I understand has not existed as an organisation for 10 years, as and they've been desperately trying to say that these were coordinated and people were coordinated. And that was, by the way, why I got sort of dragged into this madness, was because people were desperate to have people they could say were responsible for the terrible outrages that happened in communities.
On the 4th of August, British police detained more than 90 people during the riots. The protests are organized by members of the EDL. Keir Starmer started threatening them. He said the participants would regret their actions. He stated that the detentions and the initiation of new criminal cases are continuing. By the way, a number of British media reported on the Russian trace in the riots as usual. The Russian embassy in London has denied the allegations. Please write your opinion about this video in the comments. See you.